Hello, I'm Bev Turner and thank you for watching the GB News YouTube channel. Do not forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Right, I have two explosive stories for you today that are helping to shake the increasingly flaky foundations of the COVID-19 vaccine narrative. There have been cataclysmic changes to the ways in which millions of people around the world feel about vaccines and health institutions. And sometimes it is impossible to imagine where all this will end. But for now, a bombshell revelation from JD Vance, the Republican vice presidential candidate who recently appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. Now, I am a big fan of both men, so I'm trying to be impartial here. But whatever you think of them, to hear a politician at Vance's standing dropping a personal bombshell about his vaccine reaction has made waves.
The sickest that I've been in the last 15 years by far was when I took the vaccine.
Vance is, of course, a straight-talking dad of three, and he told Joe Rogan that when he got the COVID vaccine, it was, quote, the sickest I have been in the last 15 years. Now, just let that sink in for a moment. This isn't some random bloke off the street. This is a potential future vice president of the United States. By the time this goes out, he might be the vice president of the United States. And Vance described his experience in vivid detail, saying that his heart was racing and that he was left bedbound for 2 days straight. Must have been, of course, a rare occurrence, as we all know these state injectables are nothing but safe and effective. What is truly eye-opening is Vance's comparison between his vaccine experience and actually contracting COVID. Despite having had COVID 5 times, he says, I'll forgive him for the fact that he's tested that many times. He said that at its worst, it felt like a sinus infection compared to being the sickest he's ever been when he had the vaccine. Now, Joe Rogan, of course, never one to shy away from controversy, and we love him for that, chimed in with his own bombshell. He claimed to know several liberal public figures who believe that they have also suffered vaccine injuries. But here's the kicker. They are too afraid to speak out publicly for fear of being labelled anti-vaccine. JD Vance backed this up, saying, I know people who are public figures who've had serious vaccine side effects who do not want anyone to talk about it. Of course they don't. They are scared of being labelled an anti-vaxxer. But the revelations didn't stop there. Vance dropped another bombshell, revealing that one of his Senate colleagues is potentially suffering from long-term vaccine side effects. According to Vance, this unnamed senator doesn't want to talk about it, but worries that it's permanently affected his sense of balance with dizziness and vertigo.
I know people who are public people who have had serious vaccine side effects who do not want anyone to talk about it.
Absolutely.
They're scared of being labeled an anti-vaxxer.
I have a Senate colleague who doesn't want to talk about it, but worries that it's like permanently affected his sort of sense of balance and dizziness and vertigo. And yeah, it happens. I've talked to a number of people who think that they got vaccine injured. Some of them are public about it and some of them are not.
Now, let's just stop for a moment and consider the implications of this. We have a potential vice president and a sitting senator both experiencing severe side effects from a vaccine that we've been repeatedly told is completely safe. Is it any wonder that public trust in our health institutions is at an all-time low? Speaking of which, let's turn our attention to our second story of the day, featuring none other than the fantastic Senator Rand Paul. Now, Paul is known for his outspoken criticism of COVID policies. He's taken aim at what he calls the Biden-Harris CDC over their latest vaccine recommendations for infants. The CDC's 2024 to 25 COVID-19 vaccine immunization schedule advises 3 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children as young as 6 months old. That is right. 3 doses for babies. Paul didn't mince words in his criticism. He tweeted, and I quote, Pfizer drug reps, the Biden-Harris CDC, insist that your 6-month-old get 3 COVID vaccines despite no scientific studies demonstrating decreased hospitalization or death. Is anyone surprised that the public is now hesitant to believe any CDC recommendations? So let's break this down. Paul is essentially accusing the CDC of acting like pharmaceutical sales reps rather than an impartial health agency. He's pointing out that there is no scientific evidence showing these vaccines reduce hospitalisation or death in infants. Yet the CDC is pushing for not 1, not 2, but 3 doses in babies. Their vaccine schedule suggests that previously unvaccinated children aged 6 months to 4 years should receive an initial dose, followed by another at least 3 to 8 weeks later, and a third at least 8 weeks after dose 2. I despair. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea of injecting a 6-month-old baby with a vaccine 3 times, especially one with no proven benefits for that age group, is utterly bonkers. And here's where it gets interesting. Paul's criticism goes beyond just a specific recommendation. He's suggesting that this kind of baseless guidance is eroding public trust in the CDC as a whole. And honestly, can you blame people for being sceptical? And when you combine Paul's criticism with Vance's personal experience and the revelations about public figures hiding their vaccine injuries, a very troubling picture emerges. We're looking at a situation where our health institutions are pushing vaccines on the most vulnerable members of our society, whilst those who've experienced adverse effects are too afraid to speak out. This culture of silence and fear is deeply concerning. If public figures and even senators are afraid to discuss their vaccine experiences, what hope do ordinary citizens have? How can we have an honest and open dialogue about vaccine safety if people are terrified of being judged, of being labelled anti-vaxxers for simply sharing their experiences or their concerns? It's worth noting that the mainstream media has been largely silent on these issues. What a surprise. You won't see CNN or the BBC giving airtime to Vance's vaccine experience or Paul's criticism of the CDC. It is left to independent voices like ours to bring these crucial stories to light. So what's the takeaway from all this? Well, first and foremost, we need more transparency. If vaccines are truly safe and effective, then there should be no fear in discussing potential side effects or questioning recommendations. Science and medicine thrives on questioning and debate, not blind acceptance. And secondly, we need to create an environment where people feel safe sharing their experiences without fear of backlash. Whether it's a senator, a public figure, or an ordinary citizen, everyone should have the right to speak openly about their health without fear of reprisal. And lastly, we need to hold our health institutions accountable. The CDC and other agencies should be basing their recommendations on solid scientific evidence, not what appears to be pharmaceutical or political influence. Let me leave you with this thought. Your health is your most precious asset. You have the right to ask questions, to seek information, and to make informed decisions about your body and the bodies of your children. Do not let anyone shame you into silence or compliance. As always, keep questioning, keep thinking critically, and keep tuning in to GB News for the stories that the others are too afraid to touch. Until next time, this is Bev Turner. Stay vigilant.